Hello and welcome to Meet BOA Authors, a collaboration between BOA Editions and Writers and Books. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for people of all ages and backgrounds. You can find more information at our website, wab.org. Please say hello in the chat and let us know you're there. Feel free to submit questions as well. Books are available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. The link is in the chat. We're so happy to have Danni Quintos with us this evening. First we'll hear her read, and then she'll be in conversation with Peter Connors, publisher and executive director of BOA Editions. Danni Quintos' debut collection of poems explores what it means to be a racially ambiguous, multi-ethnic Asian American woman growing up in Kentucky. Encompassing a journey from girlhood to motherhood, Two Brown Dots subverts stereotypes to reclaim agency and pride in the realness of a brown girl's body, boldly declaring, "We exist, we belong, we are from here, and we will continue to be." Danni Quintos' debut collection, Two Brown Dots, won the 20th Annual A. Poulin Jr. Poetry Prize. She is also the author of Python, an ekphrastic chapbook featuring photography by her sister, Shelley Quintos. Her work has appeared in Best New Poets 2015, Cream City Review, Day One, Pluck, Salon, and elsewhere. A Kentuckian, a mom, an educator, and an Appalachian poet, Quintos lives in Lexington, Kentucky. Danni, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dan. And thank you, Writers and Books, for having me, and Ampersand for selling my book. This is really exciting. This is my first reading where I'm reading from my book, where my book is out. My book's birthday is tomorrow, so I'm gonna read you all some poems. Hey, Sue. All right. So I think I've marked all of these meticulously. I had a stress dream last night where I thought I was reading from my book, and it wasn't. It kept being not my book. I was telling Peter Connors just before this started that I thought it was my book, and it was a seed catalog, and then it was something else. So now I really have my book in front of me with my poems, and that's what I will be reading. All right. So the first poem I'm going to read is called "When Clothes Make You Cousins." Kendra Worthington was the new kid in second grade, and we were fast friends, both at Crestwood Daycare after school, both in the Yellow Dots reading group with third graders, which made us feel smarter and better. She transferred from Booker T, where almost everyone was Black or brown, and she told me their library had a system with paddle placeholders, so when you took a book from the shelf, you knew where it went. Kendra had this jacket, acid wash denim, lined with fleece. I don't remember how we got there, but its label said it was made in the Philippines. This meant we were related, cousins. In big tennis courts on the playground, we played hot lava and laughed. We're cousins, we told our friends, the proof on a tag at the nape of her neck. Okay, so this next poem, I don't think I've ever actually read this poem out loud. So this has to do with my Catholic upbringing. This is called "Cross Your Forehead, Mouth, and Heart." It was a hard pew and gold page book, every word planned and printed on a Sunday future, voices and organs echoing into bored, tall space. It was a dress I hated to wear and wondering what the wafer tasted like, if it was sweet. It was pretending I had the Apostles' Creed memorized, and shame that I didn't know the moves yet. Sit, stand, kneel, cross your forehead, mouth, and heart with your thumb. It was not knowing who I was supposed to pray to or what, how I asked God to say hello to my kindergarten teacher and goldfish, but then what should I say after? I confessed sins in a wooden phone booth without a phone, sour wine on my tongue, a girl's veil on fire in front of me, altar boys in long robes with Adidas sneakers underneath, the robot drone of tired adults reciting a prayer, the baskets on long sticks reaching down the aisle, the dollar my Lola gave me to toss in, the coloring book of apostles and doves I left blank, how my clicking heels in CCD Sunday school got me in trouble, the questions too, asking if Moses went to heaven or what Jesus's middle name was and did he have pets, the telephone game that made us blaspheme Jesus was a hot dog, the powdered donuts and hot chocolate in the fellowship hall after mass, how my Lola made a collage for the confirmation I skipped, pretending it was me, magazine grapes and catechism, my name in gold letters. The year I told my Lola I didn't want to go to CCD anymore because the only Filipino girl in the class moved to Florida, because I was the last brown girl in class asking why Jesus is so pale. But the real reason was the trouble, the time I was made to stand alone for the rest of class, keep my shoes and mouth quiet. Okay, so I'm going to read this next poem. It feels very long, maybe because the line lengths are very short and it takes up a lot of pages. And this is a very much a 90s nostalgia poem. So for all my 90s nostalgia babes out there, this is age 11. A creaky fold-out sofa with copper flowers at mom's new old house is the new old bed I share with my sleeping sister while our pet hedgehog runs away, and for months she scratches in the walls, survives on crickets and roly-polies until she returns, lured by peanut butter in a caged trap, metal door snapped shut while I am belly down in a closet clubhouse, flashlight reading the CD booklet to Jagged Little Pill, memorizing lyrics like, I'm brave, but I'm chicken shit. Like, would she go down on you in a theater? I don't know what these words mean, but the feeling of reading cuss words in the dark and the nettled burn of Alanis's voice gives me some kind of power, and mom lets me sing these cusses so long as I promise only at home where it's safe. At school, I'm the girl wearing weird outfits, a blue daisy mini dress over jeans, and everyone talks about me behind their palms. A girl with blonde, straight hair asks me where I got it, smiling mean right into my face. And when I dress up like Michael Jackson for a group project about the 80s, one sparkly glove and piecey hair pulled back in a ponytail, crotch grabbing myself and high-pitched voice, I don't break character. I am shameless. The funny girl who didn't get invited to Courtney's freak dancing party, but I do sleep over at my best friend's, where we empty her caboodle of eyeshadows and pencils on her bed, smear colors on our eyes, practicing for middle school. I make her watch the Dirty Dancing tape I snuck in my pillowcase and tell her they do it 3 times. And with the volume down, we see how. Baby gets put in a corner, and Patrick Swayze, glazed with sweat and lake water, twisting his shiny muscles to the music. She'll tell her mom the next morning at breakfast, crying. She'll say, they did it 3 times. We play the game we call What If while we fall asleep, whispering into each other's hair. What if Duke Prather asked you to prom and gave you his Letterman's jacket? Everything that happened to the twins in Sweet Valley, we want to happen to us. What if Jack Ulrich gave you a flower unlike any other in the world? Picture the rose from Beauty and the Beast, withering under a glass dome. We imagine these boys have been hiding in the air vents the whole time, watching us slip bras off our boyish chests. They elbow each other out of the way for the best view, their faces striped with light, obsessed as we are. Okay, so since we're in this sort of middle school realm, I'm going to read this poem called 6th Grade Invisibility Studies. Somehow my new blue jean flares became high waters, and everyone could see my babyish purple socks. My glasses got crooked on my face, my hips spread wide, and I started to bleed through my pants unpredictably. This is when I tried to erase myself, pushed my limp hair in front of my eyes to become invisible. A boy in art class called me the N-word and smiled. I wanted to disappear and steal his backpack, dump it out the window, math book and pencils spilling in the courtyard where only birds could get in. In orchestra class, my bow sawed the wrong way during the Moonlight Sonata, my notes too flat or too sharp. The teacher made me play alone. Imagine a violin floating in the air, squeaking. I got caught passing a note in social studies, triangle folded and flicked across a table. I was made an example of a 500-word essay no one wanted to write. I ran slowest in gym class, little legs pumping a full lap behind the athletic older girls who took the tights from my locker and tied them in a knot like a flag up high. I pretended it wasn't my locker, pressed my back against the metal gills and tried not to breathe. All the eyes watching the empty legs waving in imaginary wind. I waited for everyone to change back into their Old Navy shirts and Gap jeans, gather their hair into ponytails and leave. The bell rang in the empty locker room. I untied the knot and slipped my invisible feet in, like a jellyfish's translucent and stinging tentacles, like its empty head, a plastic bag. Okay, so my book is split into 3 sections. So there's girlhood, which I just read a few poems from girlhood, and the second section is motherhood, and the third section is folklore. So I'm going to read just a couple motherhood poems, and then I'll finish off with folklore. So this one is called Trying. Oh, pink watercolor spot in my panties. Oh, thermometers dip in the morning. Oh, cramps. Oh, cramps. Crawling up my uterus like weak and nagging claws. Oh, disappointment. Oh, single pink line on a stick after 3 long minutes. Oh, pineapple and ginger. Oval brown vitamin in my throat. Oh, fake yoga with my hips in the air. Oh, good sex and real good sex and okay sex. Oh, cervix, firm and low. Oh, egg white consistency. Oh, 2-week wait and more pineapple. Oh, leafy greens and unpacked bowl. Oh, elliptical machine, water bottle sloshing. Oh, hopeful mother-in-law. Oh, sad tampon. Oh, bottle of wine. Oh, calendar. So that is very much the before motherhood poem, Trying to be a mother. And this poem occurs in very fresh motherhood. This is called First Milk. After all that birth, the legs you've used your whole life are now wobbly, and the lake where your son used to swim trickles from between them. The spaces between your fingers feel sticky. The first thing the baby does is search for the warmth of you. His face, a small suction cup for the mounds you've been building. Those first golden drops, thick as honey, spill from you, and the nurse rushes to catch them with a plastic spoon. God forbid they soak your hospital gown or run down your rib cage. Once you were a girl with 2 breasts like the smallest constellation, an incomplete ellipsis. Today, they find new purpose. Today, they are nourishment and comfort, food, water, some kind of magic. They work so hard after years of thinking themselves merely decorative. This is so funny to read virtually to myself, feels like. So if you guys are in the chat, hey, how's it going? Thanks for staying up on a Monday night. I guess it's not that late. It's almost 8. It's almost my bedtime. So this next poem I'm going to read is the very last poem in the motherhood section. And it is about the former First Lady of the Philippines, who is one of the most notorious Filipinos. I would say a lot of people know about her, but they know very limited amounts about her, at least the people in the US. So this is a 5-part poem, and it is an epistolary poem to Imelda Marcos. It's called Letters to Imelda Marcos. 1. Dear Imelda, everyone cares about your shoes so much that they forget everything else. And I don't mean they forget your extravagant dresses and scarves or the way you glisten with Cartier diamonds. They forget or never knew at all the ways you failed, you monstered, how many Ferragamo pumps you bought when your people went barefoot, how you stole everything and made it yours. Palace, power, years from the people you imprisoned. Imelda, you're always trying to distract us with a shining thing, the thousands of crystals sewn to your once worn gown. No mention of the women gone blind for them, their fingers cramped and crooked. You are surrounded by Filipinos who tell you yes and praise you for your beauty and genius, and I am not one of them. I am fixated on your ugly, your misdirection, the stories you repeat to paint yourself as mother, diamonds and diapers in your bag during panicked exit. You want everyone to say, how beautiful, how kind. 2. Dear Imelda, your mother and my grandmother share a narrative too. My Lola was born in 1939, the year after your mother died. They are both Remedios, named for the Virgin of Remedies. They are both from Baliwag, Bulacan, a small town of rice fields and carabao, baskets, pandesal, salty small fish, and tamarind vines growing along creeks. Your Remedios slept on a table in your father's garage where your sister was conceived. What a scandal in Baliwag, like my pregnant Lola, whose husband left her alone in the heat of broken tile floors, frogs singing her asleep. Both women held their swollen bodies without remedy, without the men who were supposed to save them. 3. Dear Imelda, sometimes I see you as that aunt in trouble, exiled for the ways she embezzled, but Lord, you should see her count money, the way her hands move, the flit of the bills between her fingers. She was the second wife of an uncle, young, shiny trophy, mirrors lined the walls so she could smile at herself. And you, I imagine, love your reflection too. Silk shoes, gold necklace, the way your hair mimics the Philippine sea at night, all dark and sparkle. She even calls herself Imelda privately, trying on your extravagance, the swipe of her MasterCard at Macy's, the weight of a bracelet she can't afford. 4. Dear Imelda, here's a story my grandmother tells me. A flood in Pampanga soaked houses to their tin foreheads, and the U.S. sent dinner rolls to help. Everyone knew relief was on the way. Their food floated in muddy water, but it was delayed. You, the First Lady, decided to have your workers unwrap and repackage the bread. Mark it from the First Lady. When it arrived, it was covered with a soft green fur, inedible lumps with your name on them. 5. Dear Imelda, my Lola's heart is what keeps her from the Philippines. She says she would be dead before they could drive her across country roads to a hospital, hours, that ticking timer. You once said the heart undoubtedly is the center of life. You come back to the Philippines after your exile, after hiding your beauty queen face from the cameras. That abused dog, no one knows if it'll sink its teeth into her ribs again, numb her arm, squeeze the air from her bird bone body. She showed me an x-ray when her hand was taped down with tubes, the arteries like swollen rivers, all that water over the sides. The doctor said, no more salt. Salt will stiffen her veins, grip her brain, and squeeze out the words and faces she used to know. They will fall from her ears, out the corners of her eyes till she forgets everything. The house where she raised my dad, the acacia tree her father planted in a bright green rice field. Your heart unbroken, you return to celebrity, headshots autographed and thrown like confetti. Your children run for office and win. Your dynasty regenerates at the same rate that Filipinos forget. Okay, so I'm just going to read maybe 2 more poems, and then we'll Peter and I will chat. So this one is a poem from the folklore section towards the end of the book. This is called The Oil Painting That Hangs on My Lola's Wall. My imagined Philippines takes place in a painting. Orange sunset mirror on the water, straw huts and carabao, something about rice swept in its hulls on the tile floor, a pot of rice over an outdoor flame, salt, fish, heavy air and accent, dusk and itch, sweet diesel and smoke. This landscape is a feather, caught in the float between birdskin and concrete. I do not really know this place. I imagine my Lola's stories in this setting, mudfish scales glinting in the cracks of floors, and the burning smell of work and gasoline. The youngest of 3 sisters, their names so full of poetry, Crescenciana, Marcosa, and Remedios, a girl worn down by all the things she has to bear, this dim world and all the others before her. Okay, so I'm just going to read one more. This is Possible Reasons My Dad Won't Return to the Philippines. 1. It was different when he could teenage around in a riot, blow smoke with cousins, gulp tall yellow beers. He has never been an adult there. He'd walk into a house full of new relatives, glassy skin lechon on the table to celebrate his return. Cousins, nieces, nephews requesting manopo would line up to press foreheads to his hand and bless. 2. He might see a ghost, a father he hasn't seen in 47 years, a familiar face in a stranger, the man who delivers warm and sweet pandesal on his bicycle with the same long, straight teeth from my smile, or an old man slouching smoke into thick air on the curb. What if he asks this man for a match and sees my sister's eyes looking back at him, a face he once saw in an old photograph? 3. He has half-brothers, but that's all anyone knows, not their names or what their laughs sound like. If their teeth are gapped, eyebrows thick. If the half in common is a stranger, are you still brothers? 4. What if he forgets how to do or say something? Tagalog stale on his Kentucky tongue. The people who raised him have disappeared into a neighborhood of mausoleums. He has one aunt left. Last winter, she taught my sister and me how to eat an Ilocano bean, its fibers pulled through biting teeth. 5. What if he remembers everything? The rice balanced on a greasy thumb and scooped into a mouth, the sour bite of pink burro from a jar, pig shit swirled in dust, house slippers slapping tile before dawn, the little boy in him left here with all the cousins, no one to call nanay or tatay, alone, the shape of him on a mattress, the version of him that stayed. Thanks. Thanks. Peter, are you coming back? Should I keep going? Sue says yes, I should keep going. Ooh, can I write a list of the titles of the poems? I think I can. Yeah. Hey, Peter.
So sorry about that.
Okay.
All right. Well, that was wonderful. It was so great to hear those poems. I love them on the page, and I love hearing you read them for the first time. That was really special. So thank you for doing that. So I just have a few questions about the book and poetry and where you're coming from. And one of the first things that stood out to me with your book is the sections, you know, the fact that they're broken up into these distinct, one is girlhood, one is motherhood, and then the other is folklore. So I'm curious, at what point in the writing of the manuscript did those sections emerge, and how much did they help guide you through writing?
I think they kind of happened towards the end. I think I saw these sort of these two veins of like a folkloric vein and a girlhood vein, and I wasn't even sure if they belonged in the same collection. But then I was sort of thinking folklore as not only like folk tales, because I was very interested in like Philippine folk tales and this sort of like supernatural, you know, the ways that like the origins of animals and the stories of like how the monkey got its tail, like that kind of stuff. But also folklore as family folklore and how it informs like my identity. And so that felt like it could be in conversation with the girlhood section as well. And so that was sort of my MFA thesis back many years ago. And then I became a mom. And so this motherhood sort of section sort of bloomed from that. And it took me a long time to get to writing after I became a mom. So and I think originally what I submitted, the motherhood section, was at the end. And so I had reordered it and sort of mixed some of the folklore and girlhood poems together back and forth and rearranged several times to kind of figure out how to best organize 3 sections.
I think it's really good, especially for people here who might be trying to get their first book published or are curious about the publishing process. Like what you just said, you know, one part was your MFA thesis, and then there was this long stretch and all of that. So roughly, like, how long did you work on this book? And I'm also curious, obviously, it was published as the winner of the A. Poulin Junior Poetry Prize contest. What was that process like? Did you submit it to many other contests, or what, walk us through your life in publishing a little bit?
That's like 6 questions, Peter.
We got time.
So I think, let's see, I think some of the oldest poems in this book might be like 10 years old. So I started them before I started my MFA. And then what I continued after my MFA and kind of put together. So I would say this is about 10 years work. And after I finished my MFA, I was submitting my manuscript, like a very young version of it, for like a year. And then I became a mom and kind of stopped writing and stopped trying for a little while and wondered if I was still a poet even. And then, once my kid was a little bit more, able to walk and talk and not taking up so much of my attention, I started to write more. And especially with the pandemic, it gave me more time to be in my writing head. And so that's when I was encouraged by some mentors to like send it out there, like get my book out there, do it, so I guess I submitted, I want to say, to maybe 10 places within a year. I was given some funds by my grandmother, and I was like, what better way to use this than to use it for submission money, because it does cost money to submit a manuscript. For almost every contest except for one, which was Blessing the Boats, where you had to print it out in paper and snail mail it, which I was like, cool, love the analog. The old
guilty old school. I love
guilty. That. I was so excited to do that. It felt really good to have my manuscript printed out and see like the weight of it in the pages. So that was like kind of a cool exercise to print it and send it out snail mail. It made it feel like substantial, and like you said, I won the Poulin Prize. I was shocked when you called, and from then I worked with Amy Nizuka Matatal a lot with this manuscript. Like she she was like, I can be as hands-on or hands-off as you want. And I was like, give it all. I want all of it, as much as you have. Like, tell me everything, everything to make this better and stronger. Just because it's, you know, when you work on something for so long, it's hard to see it with fresh eyes. And I felt like I had this manuscript in all its different forms for so long. So getting her feedback was like very exhilarating, and it really inspired me to write a whole lot more. And so I think I added maybe 14 new poems to the original manuscript, you know, and I reordered like crazy, like so many things that like we're moving around from section to section. So what I had submitted to the Poulin Prize that you all chose was very different than this book. Not substantially in the content, but some of the poems and the order too.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I remember Amy being very enthusiastic about that, and really she put a lot of time and energy into that. And it's not that doesn't always happen with Poulin Prize judges, so that really stood out to me too. She was very engaged with it. And then the first line of her foreword. So for those who don't know, along with selecting the book, the Poulin Prize judge writes a foreword to the book. And the first line of Amy's foreword said, "Danni Quintos knows how to make light, period." And that just is so stunning to me. Such a great like opening statement. And I'm curious, like, when you read that, what did that feel like, and what did you sort of associate with that?
I mean, I think I was crying when I read her foreword for the first time, just like so emotional that because first of all, like Amy is a poet that I've taught her poems in when I was in grad school. You know, I feel like I've always really like looked up to her and admired her work so much. And even like the poems that I submitted, you know, to the Poulin Prize, I feel like her influence is clearly there before I spoke with her, you know. So yeah, just it was so flattering to read that that in her foreword. I hope that I can create light. Like I hope that these poems bring light to people who read them.
Yeah, they do. So I'm curious too. There's a lot of personal memories, personal anecdotes, often from young childhood in this. And I'm curious, as you were writing these, did any memories sort of come out that you had forgotten about, or that sort of surprised you as you started to write about them, or details about these things that you just had sort of buried and they came out through the writing?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and some of them, because when I drafted them was so long ago, I'm like, oh yeah, like the process of drafting these poems, a lot of them were written like collaboratively with other writers, like doing prompts. I lived when I lived in Indiana in grad school, I lived in a house of all other people in my MFA program, which like I don't think is for everybody. But we would have weekly prompts where we would like meet, like I can't remember what day of the week, but like one morning, like Sunday morning or something, and take turns giving each other prompts and kind of draft these little things that would become stories and become poems. And so I feel like there's definitely a few of those in there that, came from writing with other writers. And then also Linda Berry is like a really big influence for me. I'm a really big fan of her work. She's a writer and a graphic artist, does like a lot of comics, and she's got these books that are like sort of pedagogical, writing prompts and creativity and drawing books. And she has these exercises where you make a list and then you kind of choose an image associated with that list or a memory associated with that list, and you look around the image and you kind of describe like everything within that image. And it really, I love to do this with my students, but it really allows you to remember way more than you thought you could. So that's definitely a part of my process as well.
Do you feel like writing in different forms? And I'm thinking 3 specific forms that stood out to me in this book. And one of them was the list poems. One is the epistolary poems, which I think you do incredibly well. And the high buns I thought were really cool and fun. And I'm curious about those in specific. Is that a form that you've worked in often? And let me also ask, like, what do you think you can get to in those that, you might not be able to get to in other forms?
Okay, wait. So you had the list poems. Sorry, there's a lot of
epistolary poems, which the Imelda Marcos in particular. I thought that's a great way to just address her directly. I think it's really a fascinating way to approach writing a poem about a figure like that, a major figure. But the high buns in particular were what I was asking about most. But you can talk about any.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of traditional forms and sort of playing with them and seeing how they kind of can help me revise something or get to something that I couldn't quite get to, like in an earlier draft. But the high buns actually were inspired by a conversation, like a pandemic, like at the beginning of the pandemic, there were all these virtual events and they were free and you weren't doing much else, just holed up in your house. And so, you're going to all these events. And there was one with Amy Nizuku-Matato, Erica Meitner, and Camille Dungy and Tina Chang, I believe. And it was about motherhood and this concept of balance. And they just tore apart the concept of balance. But they also talked about like inspiration and how to balance or not balance, your mom brain and your writer brain, or keep your writing identity. And one of the things that Amy suggested was to write a high bun. And so I started to write these high buns because I wasn't writing and I was feeling like really stuck. But this idea that I could just sort of say what I did or kind of catalog a day and then end it with like a little brief haiku was so, it felt doable in a time where I hadn't really produced much or written much in so long. And this was, maybe it was 2020. So like a full year before I submitted to the Pullen Prize, before Amy picked my manuscript. So she was already obviously inspiring me before I even submitted to the Pullen Prize. But yeah, those high buns feel like they're very much inspired by that conversation with those women.
That's cool. That's very full circle. I mean, right. With Amy and also Erica Meitner, who was on doing the same reading last week.
Yeah, that was a great reading. Yeah, I loved that reading. It was so cool.
By the way, if anybody wants to write in a question, feel free to do that, and we can read your question too. I see a good comment here. The girlhood poems and folklore poems definitely speak to each other with all those pop culture references and girlhood suggesting contemporary folklore that surrounds you. From Linda. So I'd love to talk for a minute about Kentucky, which kind of becomes a character, in your book. Definitely plays a big role. And so I'm going to ask you like a 10-part question again, and you can respond because I keep doing this.
Try to remember all the things. Okay.
Well, first, I'm curious, if people know this term Appalachian poet, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what that means to you, and then how it relates to Kentucky specifically and sort of writing about Kentucky.
Sure. So the Appalachian poets, their origin. So a group of poets long ago, 1991, at the University of Kentucky. Some of them were students, some of them were teachers, and they would get together in this elevator and write poems together, just like a little group of kind of like what I was doing in my MFA house kitchen, and read poems together and write poems and have prompts. And the origin of the name Appalachia comes from Frank X. Walker. He coined the term because he read the definition of Appalachian to mean just white residents from the mountains. So he wanted to have an inclusive term that acknowledged that people of the color live in the Appalachian Mountains, live in the Appalachian region. And so that's what they named the group. And then it sort of snowballed into this collective of mentors and teachers and students that are encouraging, and they're like a family, like a community, and several generations. I was inducted in 2013, along with Joy Priest, one of my poetry siblings and loves. And it was, let's see, I guess my relationship with the Appalachian Poet started when I was in high school, because I had 3 of them as my teachers at this arts camp that I went to in 11th grade. And that was Mitchell Douglas, Ellen Hagen, and Kelly Norman Ellis. And they were the first people in Kentucky that told me that I should write about my identity and that I belonged here in Kentucky. And that was sort of radical to me, to feel like, to feel seen, and to have my, my heritage, my Asian Americanness, my, second gen immigrantness, my brown, ethnic ambiguity sort of acknowledged and celebrated by these poets that I looked up to so much. And so that's Appalachia, that they sort of like claimed me, and it made me feel like I was allowed to claim Kentucky for the first time.
That's cool. I mean, I had a follow-up question, which, I mean, that speaks to a lot of it, but I was curious, what specific inspirations and also challenges, living in Kentucky, growing up in Kentucky, being a poet in Kentucky might pose. And this is asked by somebody who's from upstate New York, who's not familiar with that culture really at all. So I'm curious.
Yeah. So, I mean, challenges, I live in Lexington. I grew up in Lexington. It's like the second biggest city in Kentucky. But it is a very white place. And so there's a bigger Asian American population now than there was when I was a kid. But it's, everything, there wasn't a lot of representation for kids that looked like me, growing up. And so I think that came with its challenges, even though, this is probably one of the most liberal cities in Kentucky. It's very diverse compared to a lot of other smaller towns in Kentucky. But yeah, I think that posed a lot of challenges growing up, because, kids would see me and not really know how to categorize me. I wasn't white and I wasn't Black. And so, like, what was I? And so I was constantly asked, what are you? And one thing that I've said over and over again is that I've never been asked where I'm from more than in Lexington, where I'm actually from. I've lived in Olympia, Washington, and Bloomington, Indiana, and those places. Like, people don't ask me the way that they do when I'm home. Yeah.
And are you in the same place that you grew up in now? Do you the same town, everything?
I mean, honestly, I am in the same neighborhood that I grew up in. My dad's house where I grew up is a block away. So I'm like very geographically in the exact same place.
Yeah. I mean, which is interesting because, especially thinking about the motherhood poems and the girlhood poems, and you're in the specific location too. I got to imagine that helped, especially, with memories for the girlhood poems.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, the landscape, the scenery, all the same, buildings, the same settings. And even just like living in my childhood neighborhood too has brought back a lot of memories and a lot of things as well. I have a poem that's about my neighborhood that I live in now, and it's also a neighborhood I grew up in, called Where Good People Live. And it's sort of grappling with this idea that, like, this neighborhood was founded as a whites only neighborhood. And that when my parents moved in, I think that we were the first family that lived in this neighborhood that was not white. And just kind of like realizing that and understanding that. And then now I'm raising my own son in this neighborhood. So, yeah. Which
I imagine gives you more insight into girlhood too, being a mother.
Absolutely.
Looking back through different lenses, as the adult mother lens. I'm curious what you're working on now. And I ask this mainly because, you spent so long obviously working on this first book, and, a lot of this content was so close to you. What do you find yourself writing about different subjects now? Is there anything that sort of like is pulling you specifically?
So I have a lot of trouble writing creatively during the school year because I teach composition. And so for whatever reason, it feels like it kind of clouds my brain in a way that I can't really produce a lot. So I haven't really been writing a whole lot since the summer, and I felt like it was sort of a marathon to finish this book and to get all the poems I wanted in it to BOA. But I do have something else in process, which is a YA novel in verse that sort of it's fictional middle school characters about like a Filipino American middle schooler. So not too far off from some of these girlhood poems. Definitely like some of the same tone, but more fictionalized. So a little bit like stretchier in the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds really cool. Awesome. Well, I am going to step away, and if you wouldn't mind leaving us with the last poem, we would appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, nice to see you, Peter. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
All right. So I'm going to end with the poem that finishes my book. This is called Python. She tells me people used to disappear in their village, grown men after nights of drinking sweet whiskey and yellow beers. Then the neighbor boy doesn't come home for merienda, his shomai gone cold in a pool of sauce. Then they found it. She doesn't know how. Maybe someone's foot got caught in a pomelo-sized hole, or someone saw the slither of tail descending into dirt and asked, what was that? Maybe a shoe, empty of its foot, pointed the way like breadcrumbs. Down the road from where my dad grew up, some men started digging. They beheaded it with shovels, unraveled a snake so big it ran the length of a house. It could wrap around a jeepney. It could eat the village whole. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you for being here. I want to thank Peter Connors. Buy the book. The link is in the chat. Thank you to our funders. I hope you all join us on Thursday. Peter Connors will be reading for the launch of his poetry book. That'll be at Writers and Books and also online. And then I hope you join us next Monday for the next in our series. We'll have Renia White with us. So, thank you all and have a good night.